welcome back to another episode of 5 Minutes with Jesus and Jesse. Today we are going to be talking about the lie that living the Christian life is easy. So first let's talk about sin, because I feel like there can always be some gray areas, it seems, with sin. And what we have to realize is that a sin for you may not be a sin for somebody else yet. So I was actually having a conversation post-church today, and one of the ladies that attends church, she's like, I heard what you said, and that's not exactly right. Like, God's very clear about sin. And I was like, I agree. I will change my statement to, what is a sin for you may not be a sin for somebody else yet, because eventually we will all be convicted of the same sin. Like, God is very clear on how he wants his followers to behave. So just because you're convicted of it right now doesn't mean that somebody else is convicted in the same way, per se. So we can think of sin a little bit in the context of parenting. So if I tell my child, you cannot do this, like we'll say whatever. I don't want you to say whatever. I don't like that word. We're not going to use it. And my child gets in trouble for saying whatever. Another parent may not have, they may not have the same thing that they're punishing their child for. Not to say that that's maybe not the best choice word and we shouldn't be using it, but maybe their child doesn't use it all the time, so they don't have to set that kind of rule. So if you have been convicted of something though, and still proceed to do it, it's sin. And it's very clear about that. In James 4:17, it says, it is sin to know what you ought to do and then not to do it. And Ephesians 5:8 says, for once you were full of darkness, but now you have light from the Lord, so live as people of light. So if your eyes are open to recognize the darkness and you are convicted of a sin and you know what you should be doing and you're not doing it, then you're living in sin. So we recognize our sin and we start living a life following Christ. And I feel like we have this misconception that when I start living a Christian life, it's going to be easy. I'm obedient, everything starts falling into place, I get his yoke, it's easy, on and on. Let's talk about how incorrect this is. So doing the right thing, the obedient thing, when everyone else is doing the opposite, is not easy. Let's talk through some examples. So not drinking, not attending the social event, not talking about people, not cussing, not wearing revealing clothes. All of that stuff is the norm. So when you're not doing those things, it's not easy because you're saying no to hanging out with your friends. You're saying no to doing the normal thing. But in Matthew 7:13-14, Jesus talks about the two paths we have. The wide path that is easily accessible that leads to destruction, or the narrow path that is difficult to find but leads to life. God never said living a life for him was going to be easy. He actually says, as I just read, it's going to be difficult, but the reward will be greater. It's difficult to do the things of God when everyone else is doing the things of the world, but you were set apart. You were called to be other than. You were changed. You were different. You were new. And when we step in and truly embrace what God has called us to do, we start dying to these old ways. We have to die to the desires we once have, the social events that don't honor God, the music that isn't singing his praises, the language that isn't speaking life, the friends that aren't growing us in our walk with him. And let me tell you, lately, I have been struggling with this and I have been feeling so lonely. Like, there was this clip on TikTok I was watching the other day, and it was this like great illustration of this, and it was just a picture of a road, and at the beginning the paths looked the same. There's a very wide path that had numerous people on it, and eventually as you take that path and go down, it starts getting really desolate and scary and desert looking and just not a nice place that you'd want to be. And the other side of the path that looks the same at the beginning is narrow and there's only a couple people on it, but as you continue down this path, it just gets more and more beautiful, the scenery. And the point of this whole video is to say, like, the wide path is the one everyone's going to be on, and it's going to be the easy choice, but it's going to lead to destruction. The narrow path is going to be difficult to find. There's only going to be a few of you, and it's going to lead to life. So this video was like, the narrow path is going to be lonely. Why? Because not many people choose that. Not many people are going to make the same decisions that you're making, to not do the things that are the norm. Most people are not going to do those things. So it makes complete sense when you start living a life for Christ that you may feel lonely. You may feel like you're missing out on whatever it is. But rest assured, if you're feeling this, you're probably on the right path. You're making tough decisions based on what you know sin is, and you're going against the grain, and that's okay. God didn't promise you a million friends. He didn't promise you an easy path. He didn't promise you a full social calendar. He didn't promise you choosing this path would be easy. What he did promise you was that choosing this path would lead to life. Choosing this path would bring you joy. Choosing this path would give you peace. And I don't know about you, but I can deal with the lonely and I can deal with the difficult if that means I get life, if that means I get joy, if that means I get peace. So we have to die to the things of this world and really, in order to gain the things of God. I was at the end of service today and I heard this. It said, you can't pray for me to convict you and then not act on my convictions, because then you're living in sin. So when you're praying for purify my heart, or help me see the ways that I'm doing things that aren't honoring you, whatever it may be, and he points those things out to you and he starts convicting you of those things and you don't act on them, that's also sin. So the loneliness, the feeling left out, the not normal things that you're doing, just remember that those things lead to life. Those things are going to lead to peace and to joy. And that's going to be greater than anything that you'll have of this world. There's another little saying that I love, that there's FOMO, the fear of missing out. But if you're following Christ, you can have the joy of missing out, the joy of not following the norm and getting what he's giving you instead.